and instability. These and other TCOs continue to present a very tangible and individualized risk of violent crime to everyday Americans and contribute to regional instability. As the president increases his focus on counter-drug and counter-cartel pressures, they're likely to seek ways to try to adapt their operations, including shifting production locations, trafficking routes, and methods. The United States continues to face a complex and evolving threat landscape with a geographically diverse set of Islamist terrorist actors seeking to propagate their ideology globally and harm Americans, even as Al-Qaeda and ISIS remain weaker today than they were at their respective peaks. The spread of Islamist ideology, in some cases led by individuals and organizations associated with the Muslim Brotherhood, poses a fundamental threat to freedom and the foundational principles that underpin Western civilization. Islamist groups and individuals use this ideology for recruiting and financial support for terrorist groups and individuals around the world, and to advance their political objectives of establishing an Islamist caliphate which governs based on Sharia. There are increasing examples of this in various European countries, and President Trump's designation of certain Muslim Brotherhood chapters as foreign terrorist organizations is a mechanism to secure Americans against this threat. In response to setbacks to their capabilities of conducting large-scale complex attacks, Islamist terrorist groups have shifted toward focusing on executing information operations to spread propaganda and inspire or enable individuals located in or with access to the West. U.S. counterterrorism efforts, primarily in Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, and Syria in 2025, were instrumental in removing key terrorist leaders and operatives, degrading the ability of Al-Qaeda and ISIS to quickly reconstitute its leadership and plan large-scale attacks against the homeland and U.S. interests abroad. Strict U.S. border enforcement measures and increased deportations of individuals with suspected links to Islamist terrorists have reduced access to the homeland and removed some potential sources of future terrorist attacks. Since January, U.S. officials have only had a handful of encounters at our borders with individuals associated with terrorist groups. This is a positive trend. However, our interagency coordinated efforts to continue to identify, locate, and remove known or suspected terrorists who may already be in the United States continues with vigilance.
Maybe. They are here.
In 2025, there were at least 3 Islamist terrorist attacks in the United States. Law enforcement disrupted at least 15 U.S.-based Islamist terrorist plotters. Roughly half of last year's disrupted plotters had some online contact with Islamist terrorists inspired by Islamist foreign terrorist organizations abroad. For example, in the recent attempt to attack a synagogue in Michigan, the shooter had familial ties to a Hezbollah leader. Al-Qaeda and ISIS pose the biggest threat to U.S. interests overseas in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, where these groups operate. In the Middle East, AQAP in Yemen, ISIS-K in South Asia, and ISIS in Syria are among the most likely groups conducting external plotting. ISIS in Syria is likely seeking to rebuild its ranks, expand support networks, and solicit funds by re-engaging with and recruiting from the likely hundreds of ISIS detainees and thousands of ISIS-linked women and children who were either released or escaped from prisons and displaced person camps that were previously run by the Syrian Democratic Forces in northeast Syria. Meanwhile, state actors present a risk broader in scope by seeking new capabilities in kinetic and cyber warfare. The United States secure nuclear deterrent continues to ensure safety in the homeland against strategic threats. However, the intelligence community assesses that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and Pakistan have been researching and developing an array of novel, advanced, or traditional missile delivery systems with nuclear and conventional payloads that put our homeland within range. The IC assesses that threats to the homeland will expand collectively to more than 16,000 missiles by 2035, from the current assessed figure of more than 3,000 missiles. The IC assesses that China and Russia are developing advanced delivery systems meant to be capable of penetrating or bypassing U.S. missile defenses. North Korea's ICBMs can already reach U.S. soil, and the IC assesses that it is committed to expanding its nuclear arsenal. Pakistan's long-range ballistic missile development potentially could include ICBMs with a range capable of striking the homeland. The IC assesses that Iran has previously demonstrated space launch and other technology it could use to begin to develop a militarily viable ICBM before 2035, should Tehran attempt to pursue that capability. However, these assessments will clearly be updated as the full impact of Operation Epic Fury's devastating strikes on Iran's missile production facilities, stockpiles, and launch capabilities is determined. These nations collectively will likely seek to understand U.S. plans for advanced missile defense for the homeland, probably for the purpose of shaping their own missile development programs and assessing U.S. intentions regarding deterrence. Shifting to the cyber domain, the IC assesses that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and non-state ransomware groups will continue to seek to compromise U.S. government and private sector networks, as well as critical infrastructure, to collect intelligence, create options for future disruption, and for financial gain. The IC assesses that China and Russia present the most persistent and active threats and are continuing their R&D efforts. North Korea's cyber program is sophisticated and agile. In 2025 alone, North Korea's cryptocurrency heist probably stole $2 billion, which the IC assesses is helping to fund the regime and include further development of its strategic weapons programs. Financially or ideologically motivated non-state actors are becoming more bold, with ransomware groups shifting to faster, high-volume attacks that are harder to identify and mitigate. Innovation in the field of artificial intelligence will likely accelerate these threats in the cyber domain. The IC assesses that it will increasingly shape cyber operations, with both cyber operators and defenders using these tools to improve their speed and effectiveness. For example, in August of 2025, cyber actors used an AI tool to conduct a data extortion operation against international government, healthcare, and public health emergency service sectors, as well as religious institutions. Moving to the Arctic, the IC assesses that Russia, and to a lesser extent China, aim to strengthen their presence in the region through increased maritime trade, natural resource extraction, and military activity. Russia, which has the longest coastline in the Arctic, has long sought recognition of its polar great power status and is deploying more military forces and building new permanent infrastructure. China, though not an Arctic country, is engaged in more limited efforts in the region to advance its own strategic and economic interests. The IC assesses that China is the most capable competitor in the field of artificial intelligence. The IC assesses that AI capabilities are rapidly advancing and changing the threat landscape, as this is a defining technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human learning comprehension, problem solving, creativity, and autonomy. It will be critical to ensure that humans remain in control of how AI is used and of the machines that may threaten to autonomously violate the interests of the American people across all domains. AI adoption at scale across the spectrum of usage poses serious risks. AI has the potential to aid in weapons and systems design and has been used in recent conflicts to influence targeting and streamline decision-making, underscoring the risk and likely threats that could manifest on the battlefield. Early developers in quantum computers will give countries an extraordinary technological advantage over others to quickly process national security information and break current encryption methodology used to protect sensitive finance, healthcare, and government information. The global security landscape is volatile and complex, with armed conflict growing more common and posing potential threats against U.S. interests. Strategic competition and regional and smaller powers are becoming more willing to use force to pursue their interests, heightening the risk of conflict. The IC assesses the space domain is becoming increasingly contested, with China and Russia developing counter-space capabilities to challenge U.S. space efforts. The threat of nuclear proliferation and advancing chemical and biological warfare capabilities continues to grow. I'll turn now to our neighborhood in the Western Hemisphere, where flagging economies, high crime rates, pervasive organized crime, migration flows, corruption, narcotics trafficking, all of these present a spectrum of risks to U.S. interests, and where strategic competitors seek to gain greater influence in the region. The IC assesses that Latin America and the Caribbean almost certainly will see hotspots of volatility in the coming year. Since Maduro's arrest, the IC assesses a shift in Venezuela's leadership, towards cooperating with the U.S. to open its economy, to develop the country's oil and gas extraction capability, and we've seen their movement in releasing political prisoners. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement review in 2026 will likely increase uncertainty in many Latin American countries, especially those that rely on Mexico as an export destination for intermediate goods for manufacture and onward export to the U.S. China, Russia, and Iran are likely seeking to sustain economic, political, and military engagement with Latin America. The IC assesses that China's demand for raw materials is likely to continue to drive its economic outreach, while Russia likely wants to expand its current security and diplomatic ties with Cuba and Nicaragua. The IC assesses that China aims to elevate its own political, economic, military, and technological power to increase its own regional positioning and global influence to fend off threats to their interests. While there are challenging areas where interests diverge, President Trump's diplomatic engagements with President Xi to work towards U.S. interests have enabled progress where those interests align. The IC assesses that China continues to rapidly modernize its military forces across all domains in pursuit of its goal to achieve world-class status by mid-century. This includes building a force with the aim of being capable of deterring U.S. and allied forces in the region, and to achieve their stated objective of developing the ability to seize Taiwan by force if necessary. However, the IC assesses that China likely prefers to set the conditions for an eventual peaceful reunification with Taiwan short of conflict. The IC assesses that an increasingly confident North Korean regime remains a source of concern regionally and globally. Its weapons of mass destruction, its conventional military capabilities, illicit cyber activities, and demonstrated willingness to use asymmetric capabilities poses a threat to U.S. and its allies, particularly South Korea and Japan. North Korea's partnership with Russia is growing, and in 2025, Kim took steps to improve ties with China, still North Korea's most important trading partner and economic benefactor. The IC assesses that North Korea's support for Russia in the war against Ukraine has increased North Korea's capabilities as their forces have gained combat experience in 21st century warfare along with equipment.
Cool.
In 2024, North Korea deployed more than 11,000 troops to Russia to support combat operations in Kursk. Pyongyang continues to develop and expand its strategic weapons programs, including missiles that can evade U.S. and regional missile defenses. It is continuing to work to increase its nuclear warhead stockpile and maintains biological and chemical weapons capabilities. Russia retains the capability to selectively challenge U.S. interests globally by military and non-military means. The IC assesses that the most dangerous threat posed by Russia to the U.S. is the potential of an escalatory spiral in an ongoing conflict such as Ukraine, or a new conflict that led to direct hostilities, including the potential deployment of nuclear weapons. The IC assesses that Putin continues to invest in Russia's defense industrial base, as well as novel capabilities that may pose a greater threat to the U.S. homeland and forces abroad than conventional weapons. Russia has advanced systems, hypersonic missiles, and undersea capabilities designed to negate U.S. military advantage. Moscow also relies on other tools to exert pressure, using gray zone tactics to further its goals and compete below the level of armed conflict. Russia is also building an extensive counterspace capabilities to contest U.S. space dominance. Its development of a nuclear counterspace weapon poses the greatest single threat to the world's space architecture. During the past year, the IC assesses that Russia has maintained the upper hand in the war against Ukraine. U.S.-led negotiations between Moscow and Kiev are ongoing. Until such an agreement is met, Moscow is likely to continue fighting a slow war of attrition until they view their objectives have been achieved. In the Middle East, conflict and instability will shape security, political, and economic dynamics in a variety of ways. The IC assesses that Operation Epic Fury is advancing fundamental change in the region that began with Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, and continued with the 12-day war last year, resulting in weakening Iran and its proxies. The IC assesses the regime in Iran appears to be intact but largely degraded due to attacks on its leadership and military capabilities. Its conventional military power projection capabilities have largely been destroyed, leaving limited options. Iran's strategic position has been significantly degraded. The US-led maximum pressure campaign and snapback of European sanctions added additional pressure to an already bleak Iranian economy, resulting in mass protests earlier this year that Tehran suppressed by killing thousands of protesters. Even if the regime remains intact, the IC assesses that internal tensions are likely to increase as Iran's economy worsens. Even so, Iran and its proxies continue to attack U.S. and allied interests in the Middle East. The IC assesses that if a hostile regime survives, it will likely seek to begin a years-long effort to rebuild its military, missiles, and UAV forces. Prior to Operation Epic Fury, the IC assesses Iran was trying to recover from the severe damage to its nuclear infrastructure sustained during the 12-day war, and continued to refuse to comply with its nuclear obligations with the IAEA, refusing them access to key facilities. The IC assesses that China, Russia, and North Korea see the United States as a strategic competitor and potential adversary. Iran has long viewed the U.S. as an adversary and is engaged in active conflict with the U.S. as of today. These four countries, the IC assesses, are likely to continue their selective cooperation with each other, which could bolster their individual capabilities and threats to U.S. interests more broadly. However, currently these relationships are primarily bilateral on selective issues and depend on broader circumstances, divergent sovereign interests, and in some cases, concerns over directly confronting the United States. These factors, the IC assesses, are likely to constrain their relationships. Finally, conflicts on the continent of Africa are likely to persist through 2026 due to poor governance, economic demands, and external support. Tensions continue between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which could rapidly accelerate to conflict. Contentious national elections in Somalia could distract the federal government away from counterterrorism actions against al-Shabaab, which continues to conduct terror attacks while providing funding and propaganda support to other elements of al-Qaeda in Yemen. The civil war in Sudan continues even as external negotiations occur. ISIS in West Africa and the Sahel have increased the intensity of their attacks against local security forces, expanding their areas of operation and moving closer to cities with a U.S. presence. The IC assesses that African governments will likely use their wealth in critical minerals to seek partnerships that deliver them meaningful benefit. Concurrent conflicts and crises across the continent will continue to put U.S. citizens at risk and cause further instability. In closing, as leaders of the intelligence community, we remain committed to providing the President and policymakers with timely, unbiased, relevant intelligence to inform decision-making and to ensure the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gabbard.
We're going to continue to monitor this very, very important hearing, an annual hearing on worldwide threats facing the United States right now. She just outlined about a dozen worldwide threats right now. We're going to continue to monitor what's going on. The questioning will begin. We'll take a quick break. Much more of our special coverage right here in the Situation Room after a short break.
Right here in the Situation Room. All right. She just got to given a layout pertaining to some of the threats. I do repeat, some of the threats that the American people are facing right now. She didn't make mention about the domestic threats necessarily, about those that have been starved out, those that have basically went through civil unrest to the degree that now if you make one little boo-boo in your life, everybody and their brother's going to know about it because of the computer system, which is basically a violation of the double jeopardy clause. That it ruins your credit. It nobody wants to hire you. Inevitably, why wouldn't the same people that had been involved in the prison system or the jail system return back? Because it's just involving in one door and out the other. It's just a rotating event. The system is so messed up right now that it's not even funny in how badly the things have become. And I'm just going to use this as an example real quick. Down the road here of some really, really good friends of mine that if it wasn't for them, I don't know that I would have been able to have made it as far as what I have here in this community because of the way that the community turned against me. But back about 2 months ago, they had a squabble with their daughter. The lady did, and she wound up getting in a fight with her boyfriend in the house, and then it wound up out of the house. Well, he had a gun on him, but he never did draw the gun. But because he had a gun on him, the police comes down there and arrests him, even though it was the daughter that started the fight. In total, she's been out well over $2,000, the lady that owns the property, with the boyfriend. And they found out just as of this week that the charges has been dismissed, providing that this individual keeps his nose clean and he don't have any more other repercussions between now and September, basically putting him on a 6-month probation period. That if he does get in trouble in any form or fashion, even if it means defending himself on his own property, all that agreement is going to be abolished and thrown away, and ain't no telling what they're going to do to him up here in Weakley County, Northwest Tennessee. And the individual that I'm talking about, I'm not saying that he's perfect, but I will say this: he does not have a criminal record at all. He ain't even had no tickets. And to think that our system is going to treat their own citizens this way is appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And to think that they're cutting welfare reform from us pertaining to our insurance and making it and raising up our deductibles to the degree that there's no way that I'm going to be able to afford even a third of my medications anymore, because some of my medications cost like $1,300 to $1,500 to have it filled. Well, I got to come up with like $700 or $800 just to fill that other part because of what Doge has done towards cutting off all these other programs. And to think that we're still taking care of people that come over here illegal, that come over here and squander upon to the system, even though we as sovereign citizens worked all our lives. We was promised that the system would take care of us once we got old enough to retire or something happened to us. It's hideous in how many dangers are out there. Like I said, she only mentioned a few of them. Just a few. I could go down 4 or 5 other lists in explaining to you how dangerous that the American lives have become just within the past 30 plus years, that we still don't hold those people that done this to us accountable. And I'm talking about the Reagan bunch. I'm talking about the Bush's bunch. I'm talking about the Clinton. I'm talking about the young Bush bunch. I'm talking about the Obama bunch. I'm talking about the Biden bunch. I'm talking about all those other administrations that has helped to lead us down this endless path of being almost $40 trillion in debt. And it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd in the dangers that we're facing off on right now, because we have been basically pushed back 30 plus years in comparison to where we should be right now, pertaining to the church world should have already been relieved or taken out of this damned society. And I'm going to use the word damned as in it has been damned upon to its own people.
Military analyst and retired Air Force Colonel Edward Layton.
Beth, what stood out to you so far? Because I know you used to be involved when you worked for the Director of National Intelligence in helping to prepare this kind of annual testimony.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really struck me was her opening line that this didn't reflect her personal views. And this was new. She didn't say that last year. And the reason is because she knows the president monitors this, and she knows that some of the things that she said last year and the things that she said this year are not necessarily fully supported of U.S. policy.
Yeah, well, and it also comes amid the war in Iran, which she has been public about prior to this, right?
Exactly.
And her views were very much, I should say, I mean, she hasn't said what they are today, but in line with Joe Kent, a top national security official who just resigned yesterday in opposition to the war.
Exactly. So we're going to see, I think, more fireworks. This is the kind of, pablum boring part, but the fireworks are going to come when she's put on.
For the past 2 weeks, all these other different countries have been against the war. They have said that it was a mistake in doing what they've done because it was going to cause sacrifices in everybody's lives. Now, as of this morning, I wake up on the MS Now, going to now change their stories. Oh, no, we need to go ahead and complete this and finish this. You see how the book of Daniel is fulfilling itself pertaining to the prophecies of how that they will be wandering from one side to the other as a drunkard, is what it says in the book of Daniel, the last part of Daniel. That's what we're doing. We're as a bunch of drunkards going from one extreme to another, to one extreme to another.
Kilometers, it would threaten most of Europe. And yes, as you mentioned, we know that Iran is gaining experience in these larger, more powerful booster technologies through its so-called space launch vehicle program. If left unimpeded, yes, Senator, they would have the ability to range missiles to the continental U.S. It's one of the reasons why degrading
If
Iran's,
they don't already, they probably do
missile
already.
production capabilities that is taking place right now in Operation Epic Fury is so important to our national security.
Sure it is.
Thank you, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Gabbard, the whole country knows that you were recently involved in an FBI operation to seize ballots in Fulton County, Georgia. Yet this was despite the fact that the warrant showed no foreign interference or nexus. Matter of fact, the warrant was based entirely on conspiracy theories that have already been examined and rejected repeatedly. Now, where is the authority for you to involve yourself in a domestic law enforcement activity?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I appreciate the question. As you know, I've addressed every issue you've raised in detail in a letter, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it in this forum. As you stated, Congress provided by statute, ODNI, with the responsibility of election security and counterintelligence in 2021. As you also know, ODNI has purview and oversight.
I know the history very well, but could you just
I am addressing the question. ODNI also has purview and overview over two domestic related agencies, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, both of which have purview over election security responsibilities to ensure the integrity of our elections. I want to correct one of your statements that you've made multiple times, which is false. I did not participate in a law enforcement activity, nor would I, because that does not exist within my authorities.
You were present on the scene. Are the photos of you on the scene false?
I was at Fulton County, sir, at the request of the president, and to work with the FBI to observe this action that had long been awaited. I was not aware of what was in the warrant or was not in the warrant.
What was the president's specific request for you to go to? What was the specific request that was made by the president for you to show up in Fulton County?
To go and observe the FBI's activities on this issue.
So why?
When you
why
look at the
a
forward
witness.
Do you have the answer why the president was knowing about this affidavit before it was even served?
I'm not aware that the president knew about an affidavit before it was served.
Then why was he sending you to Fulton County?
This occurred the day that the FBI had it approved, their warrant approved by a local judge, and they began to execute this. To address your question, sir, about the foreign nexus question, in order for us to better understand the vulnerabilities in our election systems that may exist today as we look to 2026, and yes, we are very focused on trying to make sure that this election is one that the American people have
Director
faith.
Gabbard, I've got a number of questions. Director Gabbard, I have a number of questions. Let me ask my next question, please. You have not provided any of the required reports.
That's not a question. That's a statement.
Briefings to this committee on foreign interference.
That's not a question. That's a statement.
This is the first threat assessment since 2017 that didn't even mention foreign interference. Last year, when you were already confirmed, it mentioned it at high level. Are you saying there is no foreign threat to our elections in the midterms this year?
As I stated in the outset of my remarks, this year's annual threat assessment matches the prioritization of threats and
Please answer the question, yes or no. Is there foreign threat interference to our elections this year? Are there foreign...
Please allow me to answer the question, sir. The intelligence community has been and continues to remain focused on any collection and intelligence products that show a potential foreign threat for those who are
so far there has been none then, because you've made no reports. Excuse me, ma'am. If you want to ask the questions, you should have stayed in Congress. Please answer the questions.
I didn't ask you a question, sir. I'm trying to answer your questions.
So you're saying the failure to provide any reports or the failure to have any mention of a foreign threat assessment, I would draw the conclusion there must be no foreign threat to our elections in 26. So that brings me a question that I have for both you, ma'am, and Director Patel. There are reports that in 2020, the president was preparing an executive order to potentially seize ballots or bring in federal forces. There is a published report that there is a similar EO being drafted right now about 2026, citing China. Director Patel, do you have any knowledge of that draft EO?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I do not, sir.
Director Gabbard, do you have any?
I do not.
Thank you. Let me move to Iran. Now, I understand, and I appreciated Director Gabbard's comments yesterday about agreeing that the president has sole authority, I guess, in his bones to declare whether something is an imminent threat. I didn't agree with my friend, Mr. Kent, but I didn't, again, I agreed with him yesterday on the fact that there was no imminent threat. I guess what I'm concerned
That's
about
your opinion.
is even in your printed testimony today on page 6, and your last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There's been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
No, sir. I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions.
So you chose to take
my oral delivered remarks.
You chose
sir.
to omit the parts that contradict the president. The president continues to say as well that he had no idea, was shocked that the Iranians had moved to take over the Strait of Hormuz. Did you provide any intelligence that would say that it would be that it was not likely that the Iranians would try to move on the strait?
I'm not aware of those remarks, and I think those of us here at the table can point to the fact that historically the Iranians have always threatened to leverage their control of
Why would the president say he was amazed?
I'm not aware of those remarks.
What about the comments the president made that thought that he was surprised again, reports that Iran struck the adjacent Gulf states?
Again, I'm not aware of those remarks. We have been and continue to provide.
Did you brief the president? Did you brief the president? Did you brief the president if he starts a war of choice that the likely result would be that Iran would strike adjacent Gulf nations and close the Strait of Hormuz? Did you brief him on those two facts that I think have been consistently the assumptions of the intelligence community?
I have not and won't divulge internal conversations. I will say that those of us within the intelligence community continue to provide the president with all of the best objective intelligence available to inform his
Well, it's bad
decisions.
intelligence.
Senator Collins.
CIA has bad intelligence.
Director Gabbard, you just testified that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are significantly weaker. And reflecting that view, you have devoted declining budgets, personnel, and emphasis on countering terrorism. Yet, the fact is that ISIS is growing and operating in Somalia, Afghanistan, Syria, Pakistan, and Iraq. Al-Qaeda is surging in Afghanistan, the Arabian Peninsula, and throughout Central Africa. The Houthis in Yemen and the rest of the Iranian proxies remain a serious threat. Focusing, as you have done, on great power competitors seems to have diverted resources from the fight against terrorism, a fight that's very much still going on. As I have said repeatedly, it is terrorists who want and can kill Americans today. We've just seen the terrorists in Michigan attacking the synagogue. In addition, it appears that a more stovepiped effort in the Intelligence Committee has returned. How are you ensuring that Americans are safe and that you are countering counterterrorism threats to our homeland and to U.S. citizens abroad?
Thank you, Senator Collins, for your question and the opportunity to clarify the comments in my opening statement. My reference to the size of ISIS and Al-Qaeda organizationally is smaller and weaker than it was during its peak over a decade ago. However, I completely concur with your remarks about the threat of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other Islamist terrorist groups around the world, and the threat that they pose to U.S. interests, service members, and directly to the homeland.
See, they're trying to point, as she used a while ago, stovepipe in a direction towards one particular entity or one particular group or one particular country that's bringing all these threats. It's not just one particular entity or one particular country. It's at broad. We have been attacked again and again domestically by our own people. By our own people. That's lost their minds. Why? Because the system is failing the people. The State of the Union has failed the American people. And that's the reason why that these children out here are living, half of them are living with their parents under their basements, and the other half has sought out drug activity and illegal activity because there is no future for those particular groups of people. The gulf has widened pertaining to the work class versus the poor class and the rich class. You're diminishing the work class to the point that now they're becoming nothing but the poor class because there is no future, and the rich are still getting richer. So the gulf is becoming even that much more wider. What has done this? Why is this being done? And we're not recognizing this. That's my $64,000 question.
Over the last year.
Director Patel, I'm going to follow up on this issue with you. ISIS targets potential recruits online through social media, gaming platforms, encrypted messaging apps. ISIS even facilitated a network online to smuggle illegal immigrants into the United States. Since April 2021, there have been more than 52 jihadist-inspired cases across 30 states. What measures is the FBI taking to prevent foreign terrorist organizations from recruiting or influencing Americans, while also ensuring the protection of individuals' right to privacy?
Thank you, Senator. And I think you said it best. They have transferred their capabilities in terms of personal recruitments to online recruitments, which makes any terrorist organization, including ISIS, all the more powerful. What we have done is extended and expanded resources to environments like the Threat Screening Center, which allows us to collect biometric capabilities from all over the world. We've had a double-digit increase in that and a double-digit increase in intelligence production. But
I
what
could
we've
imagine.
also done in the CT space specifically is expand the number of agents and intel analysts that go online and detect based on our biometric capabilities and intelligence that we have from the interagency. And what that leads us to is what we saw in December of last year, Senator, where we at the FBI stopped 4 terrorist attacks, 4 in California, Texas, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, 3 of which were ISIS inspired. We were able to detect these individuals both online and in person using our covert platforms, and we shuttered a bombing campaign in Southern California and 2 mass casualty events for New Year's Eve.
Director Gabbard, the intelligence community did
And hurrah for doing that. You're doing your job.
serious breach affecting our telecommunications industry due to the Chinese Salt Typhoon incursions for a very long time. In addition, the Chinese Volt Typhoon threat poses a terrible threat to U.S. critical infrastructure. Specific sectors throughout the United States have been overlooked and underprotected. What are you doing to deal with the threat to critical infrastructure, our electric grid, our communication systems, given this huge miss by our talented intelligence community?
Thank you,
There you
Senator
go.
Collins, for the question. working with our partners at NSA and others to detect these threats and how they may be evolve or developing is something we're continuing to work on. Building strong partnerships with the private sector, whether it be in the telecom industry, the financial sector, the healthcare sector, the energy sector, is something that I'm rebuilding. We've seen some of these ongoing relationships falter over previous years. I've personally been astounded by some of the conversations I've had with leaders from these industries who are just as concerned as we are about these threats to our critical infrastructure, and yet don't feel that they have the connectivity or the information to be able to secure their own infrastructure. So in short, building those stronger partnerships, integrating and being able to share information intelligence where we can is critical for us to be able to secure our country from these threats.
Thank you, Senator Collins. Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Gabbard, last year
we're going to continue to monitor this important Senate Intelligence Committee hearing with the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and other senior intelligence officials. I want to bring in retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Cedric Layton now.
It ain't going to do no good to listen to it if you're going to be breaking and talking in between. Let's see if we can get it online pertaining to, yeah, right here. Go ahead.
Did the intelligence agencies stick to their assessment that in response to an attack, the Iranians had the capability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz?
Thank you, Senator Wyden. The intelligence community has continued to provide the president and his team with the intelligence related to this operation. And
he's asking the question, man, before they struck out, before the attack.
In a global energy crisis, we're paying more for gas, the economy is in danger, and it seems to me, and I heard you discuss this with Senator Warner too, that there's a lot of hedging going on with respect to entirely foreseen consequences of the war. And that strikes me, Madam Director, as what amounts to a historic mistake. Now, my second question is, did the intelligence agencies assess that the Iranians could respond to a regime change attack from us by attacking U.S. forces and other Americans in the region?
The IC assessment has always taken very seriously the threat of the Iranian regime's missile capabilities and how our American troops within the region may be put at risk.
Again, it seems to me with Americans dying in the war, it's hard to see how you can sit here and say that the intelligence agencies couldn't provide a clear warning that if attacked, the Iranians would respond by attacking our people.
Bad leadership, bad quality leadership coming from the CIA.
Trump was asked about Iranian strikes on the Gulf states. He said, and I quote, no, the greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit the Gulf states. You all are supposed to be the greatest experts. That's what we have you there for.
Exactly.
Director Gabbard, did the intelligence agencies assess that Iran could conduct strikes on our own partners in the region if it was attacked?
The intelligence community has continued to assess the potential threats to the region, the existing threats to the region, and providing those assessments to
that ain't what he asked you, ma'am.
Makers.
He asked you before the war started, did they sit down and explain this to the president?
And I'm going to start with you, General Hartman. When Congress last reauthorized Section 702 of FISA, it included a provision that expanded the type of companies and individuals who could be forced to assist the government in its spying. Has this expansion resulted in any intelligence, General Hartman?
Senator, thanks for the question. Just to be clear, this provision provided us an ability to collect foreign intelligence on personnel outside of the United States.
All right, we're going to pull away for just a moment from this hearing with the DNI Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. By the way, this was previously scheduled. They do this annually. You may have heard Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas saying, we only get to do this once a year with this position, this leadership in the government, and he's right about that. But there have been a lot of just sort of target areas, if you will, because of the conflict against Iran and also the dangers to the homeland. So a lot to get into with intelligence that we know and what can be shared. I want to bring in just a quick analysis now on this from Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, retired.
Here we go again with opinions. Let's try to go back to the one that cut us off a while ago and see if they're back online now. Yep.
The relationship that we have with Pakistan.
Nope, they're still talking. They're still sharing their opinions versus the people actually being. Let's go to this one right here. See if they're doing a live shot here. Nope. Let's go to this one to see if they're doing a live shot. There we go.
Location data.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
The FBI uses all tools, Senator. Thank you for the question to do our mission. We do purchase commercially available information that's consistent with the Constitution and the laws under the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, and it has led to some valuable intelligence for us to be utilized with our private and partner sectors.
So you're saying that the agency will buy Americans' location data. I believe that that's what you've said in kind of intelligence lingo, and I just want to say, as we start this debate, doing that without a warrant is an outrageous end run around the Fourth Amendment. It's particularly dangerous given the use of artificial intelligence to comb through massive amounts of private information. This is Exhibit A for why Congress needs to pass our bipartisan, bicameral bill, the Government Surveillance Reform Act. I have time, I believe, for one more question. Director Patel, you 3 weeks ago.
Let's go to C-SPAN 2 real quick and see what they're talking about right here real quick. Actually, this is C-SPAN 3.
In there. So that was about a commitment to working together. Imagine just because a couple random bullets accidentally, they were looking at over a decade in prison. You know, we worked together, and now not one single American really faced that kinds of thing. So that's about committed to working together. So now, and also as a Democrat, you know, that I made me the only Democrat that refused to shutting our DHS down. You know, some people might say that that doesn't mean I have any less commitment to reform ICE. That's just categorically not true. But it's a strange devotion. I don't understand why you would shut the entire agency down just because you want those kind of reforms on ICE that has absolutely no impact on ICE and doesn't force any of those things. I refuse to do that, and I refuse to punish those union members that are working. And now especially parts of that, it's true. It's like the cybersecurity agency is part of DHS.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and that's currently on the shutdown. And now two of the top agents of cyber attacks come from Iran and China. They must be elated to know that that part is all shut down, because that's part of this shutdown that does not bring any reform to ICE. You know, that I want any less than other Democrats, you know, here. The difference is I refuse to punish and make our nation less secure part of that. So for me, I came here and I committed to come here with an open mind, and I'm going to continue to do that. And it's not going to be about gotcha moments. For me, it's about just saying, my experience with you has been consistent kindness and professionalism. You know, the first time I met, it was you and your wife behind you when I was here at the orientation here in the Senate. And even before you got the call for the big job, you know, we were even discussing about getting together and having dinner as family. So that's an ongoing relationship, because that's also part of the fact here in this town, you got to get along and find a way to work together. And now we have to come at it and just let things go in the past for that. Finding a way forward, that's my responsibility to represent Pennsylvania. And for you, I just want to thank you for showing up. And now I'm going to engage, and I'm going to remain with an open mind throughout all this, as I made to my friend here. And I'm going to do that. So thank you for bringing your family here too. And I look forward to hearing for the rest of my colleagues' views on you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Ernst.
All right, let's go back, please.
On open sources would reflect the danger the regime poses to the United States. Isn't it true they've basically been at war with the West since 1979 during the Iranian Revolution and have American blood on their hands?
That's absolutely correct. I think Iran has been a constant threat.
We have known that the whole Middle East has been nothing but a tinderbox ever since that occurrence took place of the hostages exchange between the Carter administration and the Reagan administration. This has been nothing new. Nothing new. But it has not been dealt with appropriately and effectively.
It's likely to occur through U.S.-based lone offenders. I want to ask you, Director Patel, it seems like there's been a raft of incidents recently. On March the 1st in Austin, Texas, where I live, a lone gunman wearing a sweatshirt saying "Property of Allah," and who the T-shirt he wore underneath had an Iranian flag, killed 3 innocent people and injured 12 more. And then we know in Virginia, the Old Dominion shooting, somebody who unbelievably was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison for attempting to support ISIS, but then was released only to commit another terrorist attack. We all are familiar with what's happened in Michigan, in New York, and I applaud the important role.
But once more, they're trying to, I'm going to use their terminology, use a pipe, smoke pipe, in directing towards one particular entity at one particular time, and we have been attacked again and again, just like the deal that happened in New Orleans, just like Fort Hood, just like other events, where basically these things are coming out of the woodwork of this spiritual evil entity that is working through not just ISIS, not just one particular group or one particular country, but all over the world. This is where the church sector has let down the rest of the population, that I continue to keep emphasizing upon again and again and again, beginning right here in Northwest Tennessee, launching into Washington, D.C.
Are co-led by the FBI and DHS. And what that allows us to do is things like we did down in New Orleans just over the holiday period, where we surged for a 6-week period of time, and where we dropped the murder rate by double-digit points, and also is the first time that Mardi Gras in its entire history had not one homicide. So when you bring the powers of the Homeland Security folks, DHS, and the FBI together, this is the purpose.
But yet now, just for the past 4 or 5 days, there's been how many shootings in Daytona Beach pertaining to the Spring Breakers? Come on. Come on.
City, we have it.
Are you aware of the fact that Homeland Security Investigation is a major directorate within Immigration and Customs Enforcement?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And are you aware that Senate Democrats have uniformly voted not to fund the Department of Homeland Security, including Homeland Security Investigations, TSA, FEMA?
Which is reckless endangerment and carelessness upon their behalf.
Senator, I'm aware that employees of DHS...
And it's not gross negligence, it's intentional negligence.
Yes, sir.
And we're all seeing what's happening at airports, where people are having to wait hours at a time.
Chaotic.
Because of the fact that these...
the State of the Union has failed the American people in forming this chaotic environment.
Focus on with you is the refusal to fund the functions of the Department of Homeland Security, including Homeland Security Investigations, making Americans less safe?
Absolutely.
So now it goes beyond being ignorant. Now it's an intentional act.
Operation that you all have engaged in with the FBI has engaged in with the Homeland Security Investigations. I'm looking at an article here that talks about the 190,000 Afghan nationals that were admitted to the United States, literally unvetted, and there are examples of individuals within that 190,000 who have committed terrorist attacks against against the United States and against American citizens. Is that the sort of thing that you are investigating with HSI?
Senator, that's one of the many things we're investigating with HSI, DHS, CBP, ICE.
Give me some other examples of the collaboration on what other topics, including in addition to terrorism attacks.
What we're allowed to do with our DHS partners, Senator, is enable their massive workforce to supplement ours. And what they're allowed to do is share intelligence on things that you just talked about the 100,000+ illegals that came in from Afghanistan during the Afghanistan withdrawal. Unfortunately, they weren't vetted thoroughly. So what we're doing is going back with our DHS partners and vetting absolutely every single one of them to the best that we can. But unfortunately, we're not able to go out into the country and find every single one of these individuals. But we need more than 12,000 FBI agents to do that job, which is why we are utilizing the 100,000 or so 1811s at the Department of Homeland Security to give us the information they have from their immigrant.
But you're expecting them to do it for free, not paying them nothing.
Overseas and within the country. And what we're able to do is remove these individuals off the streets in every single state across the country, to include violent gang members, to include Tren de Aragua, to include ISIS affiliated individuals, to include Al-Qaeda related affiliated individuals. And hopefully we do it before and not after, like the tragedy that we witnessed in Washington, D.C., where an individual from Afghanistan was allowed to enter into our country and shot multiple members of our uniformed military service.
Thank you, Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do need to point out, in response to some of the previous comments, twice in the last 2 weeks, as recently as last Thursday, Senator Patty Murray, the Appropriations Committee, put a bill on the floor that would have fully funded TSA, FEMA, CISA, and the Coast Guard for the rest of the year, leaving the focus on the dispute that we have with the conduct of ICE as separately. So inexplicably to me, that bill was blocked by my Republican colleagues. It would have, as I say, fully funded TSA, FEMA, CISA, Coast Guard.
Exactly.
And then focus the attention on the situation with ICE. So I just want to be clear on who's blocking funding for those 4 agencies. I'd like to ask...
The people are smarter than this, and these politicians playing both ends against the middle. They're finally wising up and seeing that what these people are doing is creating an atmosphere of doom and gloom, really.
Iran on February 27th, 28th. Was there an intelligence committee, community present in those deliberations? Mr. Ratcliffe, your response?
Senator King, probably in dozens and dozens of briefings with the president. I don't know if there was a single meeting where there was a single time where a decision was made.
Were those dozens of meetings right during the lead up to this war? I know you've met many times, but I'm talking about it in the 2 weeks or so before the decision to go into Iran was made.
Again, countless meetings with the president.
During that period?
During that period.
Director Gabbard, were you present?
Yes.
The reason I'm asking the question is there seems to be a discrepancy between what the Intelligence Committee community has reported over the years and what the president has said in terms of of this action. For example, Senator Wyden read the report from a year ago that strikes against neighboring states and action to close the Strait of Hormuz was predicted by the intelligence community. And yet the president says nobody knew. And my question is, did you tell him? Anybody want to answer that question?
Senator, I'll answer the question. So with regard to briefings, the president gets briefings constantly about intelligence. Now, the comments that you talked about, I had not heard, but what I can tell you is that Iran had specific plans to hit U.S. interests in energy sites across the region, and that's why the Department of War and the Department of State took measures for force protection and personnel protection in advance of Operation Epic Fury. I think that's what's most important.
Any predictions to the president about the Strait of Hormuz? All you got to do is look at a map, and you'll see that the vulnerability of the Strait of Hormuz. Was that part of the briefing, Director Gabbard?
I think the Director Ratcliffe made the point here is that this has long been an assessment of the IC, that Iran would likely hold the Strait of Hormuz as leverage.
And my question is, was that communicated to the president in the lead up to this action?
And it's because of that long-standing assessment that the IC has continued to report that the Department of War took the preemptive planning measures that it did.
Well, they've stated that they did not plan for the Strait of Hormuz. The president said, who knew that was going to happen? Anyway, let's move on. Does the president take a daily brief from the intelligence community? This is a yes or no question, I think.
Yeah, the president, I would say, Senator, in my estimation, on average, I brief the President of the United States on intelligence probably on average 10 to 15 times a week, where I have conversations with him about specific discrete issues. Sometimes there are dedicated sessions that last hours in length. Sometimes I'm briefing him on specific issues, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. But I would say on average, my interactions where I'm briefing the president.
They're looking for carelessness. They're looking for legitimacies regarding accountability of who would have done this without making proper preventions and seeing that it was addressed the way it was supposed to have been addressed.
That would be an answer that would be appropriate for a closed session.
Well, it's been in the public press. This is open source that it's occurring. Is it occurring?
Again, if it is occurring, that would be an answer appropriate for a closed session. What I can tell you is that according to the Department of War, any support that Iran may be receiving is not inhibiting their operational effects.
Okay, that's sort of the first cousin of a yes, I guess. According to intelligence analysis, can regime change or the elimination of the estimated 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium be accomplished without boots on the ground?
This is a very serious question.
Senator, the discussion about the Iranian nuclear capability, we intend in the closed session to talk about that in great deal. With regards to revealing any information about the ability to do that, I would have to defer that to closed session.
Okay, I'll see you in an hour. Finally, there was very little, if anything, in the report, in the assessment about climate change, and that's been in past reports. There is a lot of discussion about migration. The estimates are that climate migrants, because of the changes in the climate and the atmosphere, and particularly in the center equatorial area of the Earth, will range from 200 million to 1 billion people by 2050. Do you believe that is a national security threat that should be addressed? The Syrian refugees were about 6 million, and they upset the politics of Europe for several years. We're talking about 200 million to 1 billion people on the move. I believe that's something we should be discussing and that the intelligence community should be assessing.
Absolutely.
Director Gabbard?
Yes, Senator, there are a number of drivers of things like migration. It would be an extensive and voluminous annual threat assessment if we included every single one. This annual threat assessment is focused again on the priorities laid out by the President's national security strategy and on the effects that we can take action, operational action, to protect U.S. interests.
Well, I would suggest combating climate change is something we can take action on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
On the matter of media reports about Russian or Chinese collaboration with Iran, I would point out that the media is not a classification authority. And that kind of story, whether true or not, might be better suited for the FBI to investigate on whether there's been unlawful disclosures of classified information. I would also say it sounds like something Russia and China would do. Communist Russia used to do it during the Cold War, and Communist China has always done stuff like that. On the Patty Murray legislation, not only would it have defunded ICE and CBP, it would have also defunded Homeland Security investigations, which do critical work on our streets to protect our communities from financial crimes, from predators, from transnational gangs as well. So while we would all like to see the TSA and the Coast Guard and other critical parts of Homeland Security as well, we do not want to defund the police, this time the immigration police. Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. I believe that it's in the U.S. as national interest, our security interest, for Ukraine to be successful in defeating the Russian invasion. I'm concerned with the consequences of Operation Epic Fury on that ability of Ukraine to succeed in defending its borders. And General Adams, in broad terms, not necessarily not classified terms, what are the consequences to the supply chain, to the capability of the United States to supply NATO allies and Ukraine as a result of Operation Epic Fury? My question is that usual problem of how do we do both? Are we doing both? Is U.S. support maintained or diminished for Ukraine as a result of Epic Fury?
Senator, thank you for that question, and we do continue to, beyond Epic Fury, observe what is happening across the world in crises like Russia and Ukraine. Unfortunately for the situation there now, just based on the force composition and the delta between the Russian forces and the Ukrainian forces, the advantage is to the Russians. As we get into the classified hearing, we can talk a little more specifically about the items with regards to supply chain.
In other words, he's answering the question, yes, that it is diminishing the obligations that we've had with Ukraine.
Collects. We look at the foreign threat and what their capabilities are from a multi-int perspective. We look a little bit less at friendly capabilities. Now I would defer questions with regards to U.S. supply chain limitations with regards to logistics and the effort that the Secretary of War is having with regards to trying to boost the U.S. Defense Industrial Base. I would defer those to the department to discuss.
In other words, he's choosing not to answer the question.
Be prepared for the classified session for me to continue to pursue this. I mean, our supply chain issues are not classified in the sense that every hearing I'm in as a defense appropriator has officials from the Department of Defense testifying about the need for further assistance.
Right.
And really, I'm asking for the facts of what has happened as a result of Operation Fury, Epic Fury.
Exactly.
In the last few weeks in our supply to Ukraine and our NATO allies
commitments
who
to Ukraine.
Supplying Ukraine.
Yes, sir. The department is executing a comprehensive, in fact, the Sec War has gone around the nation to boost the defense industrial base. We know for a fact that we have to increase our defense industrial base capability. Its impact based on the munitions expended during Epic Fury will be an impact, but we need to boost it. The efforts are underway to boost it. And
so he did say yes, but at the same time he's trying to whitewash it by saying, "Oh, we're intensifying toward building more."
Along the same line, I assume let me first of all compliment you on your public service. I appreciate you. And that's not my usual town hall meeting when I get a compliment from somebody who then follows it with a but. I am interested in being of help, and in regard to your conversations in preparation for Epic Fury, I'd be interested in knowing if the consequences to our abilities to defend the United States against Russia or China or other adversaries was taken into account. How was that diminished or increased by Operation Epic Fury? And particularly in this instance about what it means, was the conversation had about what it means to our ability to help Ukraine defend itself?
Exactly.
U.S. support for Ukraine includes military and other assistance, but also we've undertaken economic sanctions against Russia for their invasion of Ukraine. And epic fury has caused a significant increase in oil prices, and the administration has waived sanctions against Russian oil companies, which are reported to say that Russia is receiving $150 million per day additional dollars as a result of the waiver. What can you tell me about our plans or your understanding of what's transpiring as a result of Operation Epic Fury in regard to those oil revenues that are now being generated in favor of Russia and the lifting of the sanctions, at least for a temporary period of time?
Senator, thanks for the comment.
And this is just one illustration, just one, of the fact that what they're doing over there is actually having a backfiring effect.
Professionals who delivered, not just for the administration, but for the American people, a flawless intelligence picture and flawless military operations in Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Absolute Resolve are the same folks involved with Operation Epic Fury. And so I hope that provides you some measure of comfort with regard to how detailed, how thoughtful the approach was to the current operation. And that's why I think that to mischaracterize it as it is being done in the media is a disservice to the folks involved in what is a very specific campaign that is different than the two that I mentioned before. It's why the president came out and said, this isn't over in a matter of hours. This is a 4 to 6 week campaign, and that it would come at some cost, because the goal of the president and the administration.
Are the risks acceptable? That's the question pertaining to the cost. Is the risk acceptable? That's the question.
Been watered, fed, and nurtured by policies of prior administrations that has allowed them to become the threat that they have. So I say all of that sort of in context to understanding that we have to address that, but at the same time, to your point on what's going on with regard to Russia and Ukraine, and you mentioned the oil issue. Sometimes policymakers have to take steps that, while they may benefit adversaries like Russia or China,
now you're talking about tick for tack.
Also think it will benefit U.S. citizens, and in this case with respect to keeping the economy on track and keeping oil prices low. So what I can tell you is the intelligence is thoughtfully considered, and I think that policymakers have taken that I'm confident that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, pursue objectives in the Middle East, and provide support with regard to the conflict in Russia and the Russian aggression in Ukraine.
Okay.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that.
Okay. Let's go to this real quick.
So the way my dad raised us, the way my mom raised us, the way they were raised, we love this country. Think about it. I'm getting to live the American dream. You're telling me a kid from Westville, Oklahoma with a speech impediment would ever be able to be here? That only happens in America. Only in America. And we all probably have the same type of dreams because none of us have royal blood. Maybe some of your parents might have served in public office or not. Mine most certainly did not. And the fact that I'm here, my goodness. That's why people want to come to our country, because they want the American dream. And I want everybody to have the same opportunity that I have, but we have to secure the homeland. We have to make sure that they feel safe stepping out and being in the public eye. We got to make sure that people can have a peace of mind and trust our government. And right now there's a mistrust in our government. I think we have an opportunity to maybe work on that. I meant it when I say that I hope in 6 months we're not. I can't guarantee it because the news choose what they're going to run, but I hope that I'm not on the news every 6 months or 6 months from now every day. I hope DHS is just able to be laser focused on doing their job and isn't controversial about taking care of the homeland. I hope people have confidence in our in our agency again, and I'm going to work every day to restore that.
And you'll bring that same passion and zeal and protective
instinct to protect every family and every community, working with local law enforcement because they know how to approach in a safe manner their communities.
Nobody will take care of their backyard better than the individual.
Senator Gallego.
Hey, Chairman. Hello, neighbor. How you doing? Easy day.
Hey, brother. Good to see you.
So, some very specific questions. What is the primary mission of Homeland Security investigations?
From the IG or from us?
I'm sorry, from Homeland Security Department. There's HSI is within Homeland Security. What is their primary mission?
Well,
it's not a trick question either.
No, I understand that. And every agency, sir, we have specific missions that we are targeted to look at our aspect of protecting the homeland in different directions, have different paths. And in different agencies, region-wide, there are 22 of them there. We all need to be in the same boat, row in the same direction, working for one common goal. And as I said, that's protect the homeland, bring peace of mind, and secure the confidence of the American people.
Okay, so HSI, and I've being from Arizona, we're very familiar with CBP, ICE, and HSI. HSI specifically is very important because they specialize in dealing with human trafficking, human smuggling, counterfeit, bank fraud, things of that nature. Actually, I have a lot of friends that work for them forever. The reason I bring this up is because there is confirmed reports that the Secretary of Homeland Security has ordered HSI agents, pull them off what I just told you were very important missions, to go to Arizona and investigate the 2020 election results, right?
Look, who would have ever thought that people would have been naive enough to have allowed the aviation airline industry of individuals getting together and turning airplanes into missiles? Just like right now, who would ever thought, pertaining to the fentanyl crisis, that people are so evil that they're willing to put fentanyl on $20 bills and throw them all over the parking lot, knowing that people are going to reach down and pick it up because right now they're in need of money, and putting it in their pocket, but become contaminated that could overdose just within a matter of minutes because now they've become in direct contact with fentanyl. We obviously have been failed by our own politicians again and again and again. The American people are wising up to this. This is the reason why we're having these hearings and having these debates.
In the Straits of Hormuz has been clear-eyed about whether or not our military bases, our embassies, and our personnel in the region would be placed at risk and in harm's way, even though the administration did very little to protect them. I know, Director Radcliffe, that you warned President Trump that if Israel assassinated the supreme leader, the IRGC would replace him with potentially a harder line puppet. In fact, I think what was clear is that the likelihood was that it would be a hard line puppet.
Exactly.
Do you disagree with that characterization of the intelligence?
To that specific question, what we knew was, first of all, I guess I have to address up front, so much of what you related in there, the difference between political rhetoric versus...
It's not political rhetoric. I'm quoting the President of the United States.
Political rhetoric versus military...
Director,
the difference between that and military and intelligence execution. But here's the most important thing. You mischaracterized this as saying there aren't clearly defined goals. The defined goals are very clear. Degrade and destroy the missile inventory and drone inventory, delay and degrade the military industrial base and factories that produce that, just degrade and destroy the IRGC Navy that could control the strait. These are all defined goals that were set out specifically. The premise of the question is that...
time back, Mr. Chairman, I can't get a word in edgewise. He won't answer the question, and then he's taking a minute of my time.
You're both big boys. You can handle it yourself.
Okay, well, Director, I agree that you are, and I appreciate what you're saying. And I'm not... My point is not what your characterization of the war is. My point is what the character is. The commander
about
in
regime
chief.
change?
I'm not asking you anymore, Mr. Director. I'm sorry because I'm out of time because of how you use the time. The complete lack of clarity should matter to everybody.
Absolutely.
President Trump, most of all, he is the person that got elected on the criticism that we had fought 2 wars in the Middle East that had lasted for 20 years. And now we're hearing the testimony is to get their ballistic missiles, to not even get to the nuclear stuff, we're going to have to be in a perpetual war with Iran. And I don't think that's where the American people are on this. This is a serious threat. This is a serious threat to us and to Israel. The question is how to handle it. And President Trump said, we are not the policemen of the world. He ran on that. And now he's turned us into the world's policeman, into its jury, into its judge, into its executioner. And just because we have the most advanced military in the world, it doesn't mean that we should be in a perpetual war all around the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Doesn't mean that we should be in a perpetual war with the world all over the world. I agree with that statement. But at the same time, it puts the American people in between a hard place and a rock based upon our laws that if we know that somebody is in violation, such as human rights, in killing their own people, such as what they was doing over in Iran, are we not committed? Are we not committed to stand up and fight for the defenseless, to help the weak, to help those that are being abused this way? So it's a catch-22.
That even though there were supposedly diplomatic activities going on, behind the scenes it was very clear, and I just ask if you would disagree or agree with me on this, it was very clear that Iran, while they were talking, they had no intentions of following through diplomatically with eliminating any of their nuclear aspirations, correct?
Senator, that's correct. And in the classified session, we can go into detail, but you've characterized it right. Diplomatically, they were saying one thing. The intelligence was reflecting quite the contrary.
Okay. Second of all, with regard to the capabilities, earlier in the 12-day war, a lot of their defensive capabilities had been taken out. Their air defenses had been taken out. The use of our aircraft in that area was safer because those defensive capabilities, most of them had been significantly reduced, meaning our young men and women who are flying those aircraft were safer. Is it fair to say that they were rebuilding their defensive capabilities as well at that time?
Yes. So I'll just comment on that. That so much is being made. Any characterization that Operation Midnight Hammer was anything but a wild success is wildly inaccurate. As a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, at the time of that, in the preceding 4 years, as is well documented and admitted to by the Iranians, they enriched uranium at least 440 kilograms at 60% for use that could be used for weapons grade to deliver a nuclear weapon. As a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, we sit here today with Iran having exactly the same amount of enriched uranium to 60%, meaning they have been unwilling and incapable of enriching uranium to 60% as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer.
And that may be true, but at the same time, did they not put into the equation that because you're going to wound the bear versus killing the bear, now you're going to piss the bear off that much more. That's going to be that much more aggressive towards making these type of uranium nuclear bombs. Did somebody not sit down and do the equation on that? I don't know.
Continuing to develop them
and at rates that were alarming.
And what about our ability to respond to those? We have very good defensive capabilities, but it takes time for us to build our defensive capabilities. Were they building their offensive capabilities while they were negotiating with us at a faster rate than we could build defensive capabilities?
Yes.
Were they continuing to work at and deliver additional resources to terrorist organizations that were affiliated with them in the region?
Yes.
So in other words, while they were supposedly diplomatically working with us during that entire time, they were continuing with regard to their nuclear intentions. They were building additional missile systems to deliver or conventional weapon systems to threaten their neighbors. Their defensive capabilities were going to be increased, making our young men and women at risk when at some point in the future we would have to basically go in and clean the mess up. I think there was an opportunity here, and I think the president made the right choice when he decided at this time that simply for our advantage and for the young men and women that have to go in and do this, that this was a safer time, if there ever is such a thing as a safer time, but the right time for our nation to respond to this threat. Is that an appropriate way of putting it, sir?
I agree with that.
Thank you.
And so do I. I agree with that due to the fact of what that they was doing to their own people, because their own people was formigating a resistance movement against the perpetrators that we was fighting against for the past 47 years, or however many years it was. My point is this: how come these things wasn't dealt with appropriately throughout all these years? How come we sat idly by and let these people build and build and build and grow and grow and grow without putting a stop to it? Just kind of like how come we left the Afghanistan people and left not millions but billions of dollars worth of assets pertaining to military equipment over there, and how come we didn't take time to blow it up, destroy it, bury it, or do whatever with it? These are major decisions that are coming from the top, not the bottom, pertaining to the top brass that I feel like that the American people deserve to know the answers to.
Thanks for the question. I appreciate the opportunity to address that. Yes, we have to be careful about what we can say, and we go into further detail in the classified session. But this is something that when I became the director, as you're aware, Senator, there are disparate opinions across the IC about what the cause of these AHIs may or may not be.
Otherwise known as Havana syndrome.
Well, Havana syndrome, yeah, or AHI. And the question of whether or not it could be the result of a...
They're talking about South America now.
Seen this poster that I'm about to put behind me. Have you ever seen this before, Senator?
I don't believe so.
There's no reason you should have. I was introduced to this material by Tim Tebow, Heisman Trophy winner, who now spends a lot of his time trying to help work with child victims of sex abuse. This poster reflects every individual IP address in the United States in about a 1-month period that was sharing, distributing, posting, or trading child sex abuse material.
Good.
Or child pornography of some form.
Good
You
God.
want to guess how many points there are on that map?
It makes me sick. I have no idea.
338,000. That's just a 1-month period. Now, can you see any blue dots on that map, Senator Mullen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's very, you got better eyes than I do. I mean, there's like very few of them. I'd be surprised if anybody in the audience can see them. The blue dots are the number of investigations that are open. Look at the red dots. 338,000. Look at the blue dots. You can hardly see them. Why would that be? Because in the best of times, the Department of Homeland Security has only 10 HSI agents who are fully dedicated to doing this. This is all Congress has given you. 10. Right now, none of those are funded. Is this a good time for the Department of Homeland Security to be shut down?
I think any parent can look at that and it makes you sick, especially with teenage daughters like myself. That's scary. We have to focus on this.
It's very scary. That's exactly right. I'm glad to hear you say that.
Regardless whether you're a parent or not, it should be scary.
Predecessor in this role, Alejandro Mayorkas, lost track of 450,000 children who were trafficked across our border over a 4-year period. 450,000 children. It's the biggest child trafficking ring that was set up under the last administration in the history of this country.
My God.
The president has been doing a tremendous job. They found in the last year over 145,000 of them. That leaves almost 300,000 who are still missing.
At large.
And yet, the Department of Homeland Security is unfunded and shut down. Let me just ask you again. Does it seem like a good time for that?
No, sir.
Let's talk a little bit about the challenges that are being faced by people across the country who are facing natural disasters as we have in my home state of Missouri. We had major tornadoes rip through Missouri last spring, all across the state, particularly concentrated in the eastern part of the state, the St. Louis area, southeast Missouri. We have thousands of people who are without power, who lost their homes, many who were injured. We've had much disaster aid approved by FEMA, but we're still waiting for some of that aid to get to us. And now FEMA is shut down. So I've got thousands of people in Missouri who are awaiting the aid that the president has approved, by the way, and that FEMA has approved, but that's in the process of coming to the state. I've got probably hundreds of people who are not able to go back to their homes and who are applying for individual assistance that hasn't yet been processed by FEMA. And now they're being told, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do because FEMA shut down. Does this seem like a good time for DHS and FEMA to be shut down?
No, sir.
In any airport in the country right now, if you go and look, you will find hours, backups of 4
Chaos.
5 hours. You'll
Chaos.
find TSA agents. You alluded to this earlier, Senator. Over 10% of TSA agents now are not able to come to the job. Why? Because
Chaos.
they make on average $45,000 a year. They can't afford their rent. They can't afford to buy groceries for their kids. They've missed now 2 paychecks. This is endangering the security of our flyers. It's endangering the security of our airports. This is a terrible time for DHS to be shut down. Here's my point. Whether we're talking about children who are missing, whether we're talking about the situation against our law enforcement officers, whether we're talking about the dangers to the homeland, we are involved in a major conflict overseas. This nation's homeland needs to be secured, and yet my friends across the aisle have shut down the Department of Homeland Security. They have defunded every agency we just talked about, and I just want to ask them, how long is it going to take? How long are these children going to have to wait in exploitation? How many more are going to have to go missing?
This is a failed government to its own people by allowing for this to get in this type of situation. Because just look at the timing. Just look at the consequences.
I'm not going to comment on what the president did or didn't ask me on any topic.
I'm not asking if you briefed it. I'm just asking if there was a request.
I understand.
By the White House. Director Ratcliffe, were you asked to brief on whether Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz?
The briefings to the president of the White House typically don't come at the request of the White House. So typically when we get intelligence that we want the president to be aware of, the intelligence community brings that to the president.
Did you produce the analysis?
You've been watching our live coverage of national security and intelligence officials testifying at this annual hearing on threats across the world. If you'd like to continue watching this hearing, you can head over to youtube.com/cspan. We're going to break away to bring you live coverage of the U.S. Senate, gaveling in to continue consideration of Republican legislation requiring proof of U.S. citizenship and photo.
It's just to point out here, it's challenging to forget about actually what was in the brief for a second. We're having a hard time finding out not only if you briefed the president on something, but even if the White House asked if they could be briefed on something or if analysis was produced. So I just want to point out here, this is about 6 days.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
I go back to the point. It's the same approach that we took to the prior operations, which to your credit, Senator, you have praised the intelligence and military communities in Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Absolute Resolve. It's the same approach and the same professionals in terms of how they approached this particular operation.
We're trying to figure out if the president knew what the downside was of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. And I'm having a hard time finding out whether the White House asked or whether there was a brief, whether the president knew. Did he know this was going to happen, or did he just disregard it? And I just want to point out something that was released about 6 days ago. This is a fundraising email from the president of the United States. And in this email here, where there's multiple links to donate money, it says, as a national security briefing member, you'll receive my private national security briefings. Director Gabbard or Director Radcliffe, Do you think the public should be able to, supporters of the president should be able to pay and receive his private national security briefings? I assume these are briefings, Director Radcliffe, that you provide to the president that is now going to be provided to somebody who makes a
regardless
donation.
of what that I don't know what that document is, but regardless of what it says, it didn't happen.
Oh, no, this is new.
But what I'm telling you is that the Hatch Act would prevent me from an apolitical role from engaging in that. I'm not aware that anything like that happened.
Yeah, this says unfiltered updates. So, Director Gabbard, do you have any comment on whether unfiltered updates of private national security briefings should be made to individuals that donate to the president?
I'm not familiar with that document, and
It's been made very public 6 days ago. We'll get you a copy here, because I agree with you, Director Ratcliffe, that the Hatch Act should prohibit this type of conduct.
Exactly.
Senator Langford joins us from what I gather is a very exciting confirmation hearing for Senator Mullen.
It is, actually. For all of you, thank you. Thank you for the time that you give to the country to be able to serve, for your families and the sacrifice that you make to be able to do this, and all the professionals who work around you. Please pass on our gratitude to them, because they work incredibly hard and difficult tasks in this. I want to talk about something that's a little closer to home on this. A lot of Oklahomans that I talk to, and quite frankly, folks even outside the state on it, when they think about threats, they, as strange as this may sound to those of us that deal with missiles and ballistics, they think about the threat to their family and to their income and to who they are. And a lot of it is international scammers that are now reaching into the United States to be able to gather data or to be able to steal money from them. AI has accelerated this dramatically, and I know the Worldwide Threats has mentioned this and some of the challenges that we face on it. But the challenge is getting bigger. FBI had noted that in 2024, it was almost $17 billion that was assumed lost to scammers, a lot of those internationals. Some estimates are as high as $50 billion on it. AI continues to be able to accelerate the capabilities on it. OpenAI even noted now that they're putting online ads saying, if you've been scammed, here's a way to recover your money. And that is actually a scam. It's taking them to a fake FBI page where they can then turn in and to say, if you've been scammed, here's how the FBI is going to actually come help you to recover it. But even that page is fake, and they're going to be able to steal their information. This is accelerating at a pace that's pretty dramatic with the use of AI on this. Director Patel, I know that you guys are on it. I know that there's multiple entities on it, but this is a big challenge. And a lot of Americans are very, very concerned about the threats to their families. They may have their parents that are more vulnerable at this time and being targeted. How do we take some of this on to be able to confront what's happening online, to be able to attack people and to be able to scam them?
Thank you, Senator. And it's with any other high priority operation that the FBI runs, whether it's CICT or we're talking about scamming and scam centers here. One, you have to drown and get online with your online covert employees and platforms. And we've increased funding. And we've also, what we've done strategically is move people out of Washington, D.C. on the intel analyst front and the support staff front to places like Oklahoma. Actually, every single state across the country has received a plus up because of that. And what we've created is the Internet Crime Complaint Center, the IC3, which I know you're familiar with and reference. So what we're doing on the homeland is going out into the streets of America, on the online platforms in America. And
I on average get between 8 and 15 telephone calls a day that are supposedly generated through a computer, that if you'll answer the telephone call and be completely, totally silent, you won't hear a utter thing respond back, and within just a matter of a few seconds or minutes, it automatically disconnects itself. I guarantee you, if I would have answered the telephone and said hello, immediately something else would have triggered my voice in there sounding like a real human being talking, while the whole time it was just a scam. This goes on simultaneously, 7 days a week, 24/7. This is part of our American politicians' job, to protect the American people from this type of activity, this type of harassment, and this type of vulnerability because of the people being scammed.
thinking about this and talking about it. Director Patel, I'm going to stay with you. The counter-narcotics work has been phenomenal in the past year and a half. The amount of methamphetamine and fentanyl that have been seized coming across our border has been dramatic, and that has a real...
And that is true, it has, but at the same time, they're getting wittier, they're getting smarter. They want to take the American people out. We're in danger. Our lives are in danger.
FBI.
Absolutely, Senator. The counter-narcotic mission can't be complete without state and local law enforcement. So we are embedding more task force officers across the country on the specific counter-narcotics mission. We've also stood up with our interagency partners in Tucson, Arizona.
I'm going to say this and then I'm going to let this go. As far as I'm concerned, one of our Tennessee senators, our Tennessee representatives, has said hang them and hang them high, especially those that mess around with children. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the state of Florida has recently passed a law. Any child under 12 or below, if an adult messes with that child, it is no second chances. None whatsoever. Until we strengthen and unify our laws, either federal or state, we're going to continue to have problems coming out of the very circuitry that's supposed to be protecting us. Good luck to each and every one of us. I hope that you've gotten something out of this particular message today. I've been flip-flopping back and forth pertaining to international affairs versus state affairs versus local affairs. And I just hope and pray that you've gotten something out of this. God bless America. God bless our troops. And God bless America in our endeavors with which way that we go from this moment on. There's no doubt that there's been so many mistakes made. And if we continue to keep making the mistakes that we've made in the past, I'm just in dire doubt of believing that we're going to be able to turn this around, especially the way that certain politicians desire or want it to turn around. I'm going to leave by this individual statement.
To pose to so many governments and entities across the world on that. How is the Muslim Brotherhood financing itself and its acts of terrorism? And is there something that we need to do here to be able to make sure that we're protecting Americans in the threat?
Senator, I think with regard to the Muslim Brotherhood abroad, we view that just as we do other proxies across the Middle East, the Houthis and other groups, and I can relate to you that the CIA is very focused on the counterterrorism front. You weren't here before. Right. I said in the classified portion I would get into the CIA's success with regard to groups like the Muslim Brotherhood in a classified setting, where I can share with you the impact that we're having. But and across the board with regard to terrorist groups and our counterterrorism activities, I can publicly characterize it as saying we've accomplished more in the last year than in the 4 years of the prior administration combined. So hopefully it gives you some measure of comfort about how we're approaching things and the effectiveness that we've had in the last year in that regard. And I look forward to getting into detail in the classified portion.
Look forward to that. Thank you. Senator Reid.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. The Washington Post reported earlier this week, in their words, the U.S. intelligence assessments say Iran's regime likely will remain in place for now, weakened but more hardline, with the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps security forces exerting greater control. Director Gabbard, do you stand by that reported intelligence community assessment?
I don't stand by any leaked so-called intelligence to the media. I do stand by the intelligence community's assessment that was included in the annual threat assessment that speaks directly to this issue, that as of this moment, the regime maintains power within Iran, even though they are vastly degraded on almost every front.
The answer to the question I'm going to go ahead and answer is oil. OIL. Just like Donald Trump made mention, we should go over there and take the oil from them people, because obviously we have allowed for people to gain access to something that now they're using against us, especially the cash flow that they're using. And they're staying financially financed because of oil. Because of what various politicians or various presidential administrations has done in the past, going all the way back into the Carter and the Reagan and the Bush era. It's not a wonder. It's not some sort of a mystery. It's on the wall, friends. Good luck to all of us, and God bless, and may God have mercy on us all. Shalom. Sweet Jesus, help us all.